The first rays of Lagos sunshine were beginning to filter through Mike Okafor's expensive curtains when he stirred from his alcohol-induced sleep. His head throbbed, a reminder of the previous night's excesses at Club Platinum. Through his hangover, he felt the familiar morning urge to urinate. Stumbling through his luxury apartment, he went to the bathroom, the cool marble tiles beneath his feet helping to wake him. Standing before the mirror, Jide pulled his boxers down slightly to confirm his growing suspicion. He froze. His manhood was gone, completely gone. Where it should have been was nothing but smooth skin, as if he'd been born without it. He touched the area in panic, his hands trembling. This had to be a dream. No, a nightmare. He slapped himself, hoping to wake up from his nightmare. But the truth stared back at him through the cold reflection of the mirror. "What is this?" he shouted, his voice trembling. His legs wobbled, and he gripped the sink for support. A surge of panic coursed through him. As panic set in, Mike raced back to the previous night. Club Exodus had been packed as usual for a Friday night. He remembered meeting Sandra, a stunning beauty in a red dress who had caught his eye from across the VIP section. She wasn't like the usual girls he encountered. There was something mysterious about her. They had shared expensive champagne, danced, and ended up at her apartment in Victoria Island. Everything had seemed normal, better than usual, actually. He'd left around 2 a.m., pleased with another conquest. Now, just 4 hours later, his world had turned upside down. Mike threw on a jacket and raced to his Mercedes without bothering to change out of his pajamas. The early morning Lagos traffic hadn't built up yet, allowing him to speed through the streets to Sandra's apartment building. His aggressive knocking drew curious neighbors to their doors. One elderly woman in a wrapper peered out disapprovingly at the commotion. When Sandra finally opened her door, she was still in her nightgown, confusion evident on her face. The seductive woman from last night had been replaced by someone who looked remarkably ordinary in the morning light. Before Sandra could speak, Mike grabbed her arm, dragging her out of her apartment and into the hallway, ignoring the stares of onlookers. "What the hell did you do to me?" Mike hissed, his voice shaking with anger and fear. His pulse hammered in his neck as he stepped closer, his chest heaving. Sandra tried to pull away, her eyes wide with confusion. "What are you talking about? Mike, calm down!" she protested, looking around as if she was already regretting the whole situation. Mike clenched his jaw, his face flushed with rage. "I woke up and It's gone, Sandra. You did something. I want to know what you did to my manhood." Sandra's eyes flickered with surprise. "Are you mad?" she whispered harshly, trying to free her arm from his grip. "I don't know what you're talking about. You need help, Mike. You've lost it." Mike tightened his grip, his fingers digging into her arm as the tension between them thickened. "Don't lie to me," he spat, voice low and dangerous. "I know you had something to do with it. You better explain yourself, or I swear." She yanked her arm free, stepping back, her face flushed with a mix of anger and something else, something unsettling. "You think I'm behind this?" Sandra snapped, her voice trembling with indignation. "Get out of my face, Mike. I don't need this. I never asked for any of this." Mike was confused. Sandra seemed to be telling him the truth. So he went back home. All right, before we continue the story, please remember to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications for more thrilling stories. Also, could you please like my video, share with friends, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. God bless you. Back in his apartment, Mike sat at his desk, hands shaking as he opened his phone's contact list. The names seemed endless. Emily, Jennifer, Blessing, Adana, Zainab, Kioma, Folake. Each one represented a conquest, a night of pleasure, followed by days or weeks of empty promises before he moved on to the next. He began with the most recent. Emily, "You're crazy. Don't call me again." Jennifer, "Who is this?" "Oh, you. I thought I had blocked your number. How come you are calling me again?" blessing. After 3 months of silence, you call with this madness. With each call, his desperation grew. Some laughed, others cursed, a few threatened legal action. None admitted to knowing anything about his condition. By evening, exhausted and terrified, Mike drove to Kunle's auto repair shop in Surulere. His friend of 15 years was the only person he could trust with something this bizarre. As he explained his situation, the familiar sounds of mechanics at work and the smell of motor oil provided little comfort. Kunle listened without interrupting, wiping his greasy hands on an old rag. When Mike finished, silence hung between them, broken only by the distant sound of traffic and a radio playing high-life music. "Guy?" Kunle finally said, "This one no be ordinary I matter. Someone don jazz you well. Over the next week, Kunle took Mike to various spiritual consultants. They visited a celestial church in Yaba, where a pastor in white robes made him bathe in holy water. They visited one of Lagos's most powerful medicine men, but nothing worked. Their search led them to Baba Raji, a famous native doctor living in a remote part of Ogun State. The older man's compound was filled with strange objects, calabashes hanging from trees, mysterious symbols drawn on walls, and the pungent smell of herbs filling the air. As Baba Raji performed his consultations, Mike's thoughts drifted to his mother. She had called just last week, her voice weaker than before. The doctors had given her 2 years at most. Her previous words haunted him. "My son, I won't be here forever. When will you give me grandchildren to hold?" He had dismissed her concerns as always. At 40, he believed he had plenty of time. His real estate business was booming. He had money to spend, and Lagos had no shortage of beautiful women. Babaraji's requirements were expensive and bizarre. Mike bought 7 white hens, specific types of fruits, and various colored candles. The rituals lasted 3 days, but did not bring any change. "Something is blocking my powers," Babaraji finally admitted. "A force stronger than mine is at work here." Weeks passed. Mike stopped going to work, avoided friends, and barely ate. His once immaculate apartment became a mess of unwashed dishes and scattered clothes. One morning, he heard a woman preaching outside his window, her voice strong and clear. "Nothing is impossible with God. When all else fails, he remains faithful. Repent, repent, repent." Something about her words pierced his hardened heart. Extremely tired and hopeless, Mike found himself in front of a church close to his house. The church was small, tucked between 2 office buildings. Pastor Emmanuel, a tall man with gentle eyes, listened to Mike's story without judgment. During prayers, the pastor's demeanor changed dramatically. "Your mother," he declared, his voice carrying divine authority. "The Spirit shows me your mother's tears, years of tears. She has been to places she shouldn't have gone, driven by desperation." The next day, Mike traveled to village in Enugu. Mike found his mother in her modest apartment, the smell of bitter leaf soup wafting from her tiny kitchen. Despite her illness, she insisted on cooking for herself. Seeing her thin frame and graying hair made his heart ache. When had she gotten so old? He hesitated for a moment before speaking. "Mama," he began, his voice tight, "I need to ask you something." She looked up from the stove, wiping her hands on her wrapper. As their eyes met, she froze. Her expression shifted, and she sank into a chair without a word. Her face crumpled, tears welling up, and Mike knew. She had known this moment would come. "How did you find out?" she whispered, the weight of her secret hanging between them. Mike's chest tightened. He didn't need to say anything more. The truth was in her eyes. He could see how much it hurt her to finally face it. Through her tears, his mother revealed everything. 3 months ago, she had traveled to her village in Enugu, seeking out the notorious witch doctor, Dibia Ekwensu. The price had been steep, not just in money, but in blood sacrifices and ritual requirements. I have watched you destroy yourself and others for too long, she explained, her voice breaking. All these girls you use and discard. Their mothers' hearts break too. I couldn't bear to die seeing you like this. Dibia Ekwensu had promised me that you would change your ways when he was through with you. I didn't want him to take your manhood from you. I have not been able to sleep since the day I visited Dibia. I have been having nightmares about your manhood too. The weight of his mother's confession pressed heavily on Mike's chest. As the truth of her actions reverberated through him, memories from his past surged, sharp and unforgiving. Adana was the first to appear in his mind, her gentle spirit, her unyielding love. She was the school teacher, a virgin who gave Mike her virginity because she truly loved him. But in his arrogance, he had discarded her, leaving her heartbroken and uncertain of her worth. Then there was Blessing, a married woman who was swayed by his sweet talks and looks. She nearly destroyed her marriage with her affair because of Mike's deceit, lies, and selfishness. He could still hear the echoes of her voice, the pain of betrayal, and the devastation in her eyes when he walked away, leaving her to pick up the pieces. There were countless others, faces he couldn't even remember, women he had used, men he had lied to, people he had hurt without a care in the world. Many other women suffered heartbreak at Mike's hands. He had promised them the world, making them believe he would always be there. But as soon as he had enough of them, he left them without a second thought. Each face flashed before his eyes, each memory bringing fresh waves of shame and guilt. But there was a way to redemption. Pastor Emmanuel showed Mike the path to redemption, which was filled with discomfort, humility, and transformation. After hearing Mike's story, the pastor set out a plan to force him to seek forgiveness and restitution from everyone he had wronged. For 40 days, the pastor said, his voice steady and commanding, "You will fast and pray. During this time, you will seek out those you have hurt. You will make amends where you can and apologize for the pain you've caused. But most importantly, you must allow God to heal your heart." Mike nodded silently, knowing there was no turning back. It wouldn't be easy. He had wronged too many people and left too many lives in ruins. But Pastor Emmanuel's words resonated with him. Redemption wouldn't come without effort. It would come through sacrifice and sincerity. The first few days of fasting were agonizing. Mike barely had the energy to keep his eyes open, his body crying out for food. But the hunger pangs were nothing compared to his deep spiritual yearning. Prayer became his lifeline as he poured his heart out to God, asking for forgiveness, for strength, and for the wisdom to right his wrongs. Each day he spent fasting and praying was a day of painful reflection. He would spend hours on his knees asking for God's guidance while also facing the people he had hurt in the past. Some doors were slammed in his face. Some people refused to hear him out, and others cursed him, blaming him for the pain he had caused. Adana had always been different. Their relationship was genuine, but his immaturity had led him to throw it all away. 5 years had passed since he last saw her, but Mike knew he had to face her. He tracked her down, finding her still teaching at a primary school in Yaba, her spirit unchanged. When he approached her, she recognized him immediately, though her face showed no sign of the pain she had once felt. Instead, there was only quiet strength and grace. "I heard you were sick," she said, her voice soft but filled with concern. Mike's heart tightened. He had no right to ask for her forgiveness or expect anything from her after what he had done. But when she forgave him, her words broke something deep inside him. It wasn't just forgiveness, it was a release. Adana wasn't just letting go of the past, she was setting him free too. Her forgiveness was a turning point in his journey, one that filled him with hope that maybe, Just maybe he could change. As he hugged her, Mike felt strange chills between his legs. That night, he noticed his manhood had been restored. The change wasn't just physical, though. He had been given a second chance, not just at life, but at redemption. Over time, something miraculous began to happen. His mother's health, which had been steadily declining for months, began to improve. The doctors were baffled, unable to explain the sudden reversal of her condition. Mike's heart swelled as he watched her grow stronger each day. It wasn't just the physical transformation that amazed him. It was the light returning to her eyes, the spark of life that had long been extinguished. Pastor Emmanuel had told him that his mother's healing was tied to his own transformation. Your healing isn't from medicine, the pastor had said. It's from your son's change. His heart has been made new, and God is honoring that. After everything Mike had been through, Adana agreed to meet him for coffee. Just as friends, she insisted, though there was a warmth in her smile that he hadn't seen before. They spent hours talking, catching up on everything they had missed in each other's lives. Mike found himself admiring her more than ever. She was stronger now, more confident, and he knew he had missed out on the woman she had become. But he wasn't the same man who had abandoned her. He was different now, and for the first time, he saw Adana for who she truly was, his equal, his counterpart. 6 months later, Mike kneeled before Adana in the school where she taught. The excitement of her pupils filled the room, but Mike only had eyes for Adana. His mother stood nearby, tears streaming down her face, proud of the man her son had become. I don't deserve a second chance, Mike said, his voice thick with emotion. But if you'll have me, Adana's smile was all the answer he needed. Their traditional wedding took place in the village, celebrating love and redemption. As Mike and Adana exchanged vows, Mike caught his mother's eye in the crowd. She was radiant, glowing with health and happiness, a stark contrast to the woman she had been just months before. 9 months later, as Mike cradled his newborn twin daughters, he finally understood. He had learned that love, sacrifice, and true transformation could heal even the deepest wounds. So, friend, can you tell us what moral lesson you learned? We can see that there are consequences for all our actions. However, there is redemption through accountability, forgiveness, and spiritual growth. Let us learn to respect one another, embracing change, showing that love and humility can heal even the deepest wounds and lead to new beginnings.